Welcome to Action on Pain, a podcast dedicated to highlighting the significant efforts underway in Canada to address chronic pain.
By presenting perspectives from individuals who live with pain, researchers, clinicians, and other stakeholders, we explore various impacts on people's lives and the initiatives, research endeavors, and the committed professionals working to effect meaningful change.
This work is guided by Health Canada's Action Plan for Pain. Join us as we raise awareness and share stories that are shaping the future of pain management in Canada.
Well, hi, everyone, and welcome back to another Action on Pain podcast. And we thank everybody for joining us again today. Jen, Virginia, I mean, can you believe it? We're at a point here where summer is technically over weather-wise. I mean, maybe not on the calendar, but here we go moving into the fall weather, and it's beautiful out here in the Okanagan Valley in British Columbia. And I'm just really happy to be joining you guys and our lovely guests today.
Thanks, Keith. I mean, Nova Scotia here, it is too. Absolutely beautiful. Little chilly, but beautiful. I love the fall.
Yes.
So we are here to welcome Julie, and I've been blessed to have some connections with Julie over the last year with some of the work she's doing in Newfoundland, and has joined us in doing an incredible knowledge mobilization event in Newfoundland on pain and pain awareness and peer support, and implement that in their whole hub and spoke model and what they're doing. We'll talk more about that as we get going on. So welcome, Julie.
Amazing. And you're right, this summer has completely flown by. And here in the nation's capital in Ottawa, it's a cool day, lots of beautiful fall colors everywhere. It's actually very gorgeous. It's a bonus to getting cooler weather. And also a bonus for me today to have the first time opportunity to meet Julie Sullivan for the first time. So a real pleasure. And we're so excited to have you here today. We are welcoming Julie Sullivan joining us on our podcast. And she is the director of the Strategic Health Network dedicated to chronic pain in Newfoundland and Labrador, and is joining us today as a representative of the Newfoundland and Labrador Health Services. Julie, it is our sincere pleasure to have you join us today.
Oh, it is my pleasure to be here. I'm honored, and it's such an exciting time in Newfoundland and Labrador for the pain space. And I'm just delighted to be able to come and share some of the work that we're working on.
Great. Thanks.
That's great.
Thanks, Julie. I've had the great pleasure to learn, to meet with you and work with you on some things that you're working on in Newfoundland and Labrador. And I was really impressed in how you're working on integrating a step care hub and spoke model to improve chronic pain prevention and management services across Newfoundland. So I'm wondering if you could start first by sharing with our listeners exactly what is a hub and spoke model. I mean, Newfoundland is an extremely large province with a lot of rural communities. So how's that going to work across it? And how will this improve access to care services for those in Newfoundland and Labrador living with pain?
Yes. So it's a great question. And I stepped into this role just a little over a year ago. And for me, it was also a big learning curve, to come into the pain space, and spent a lot of time over the past year holding partner discussions, like internal and external, to the health organization, but also in and out of the province, to really understand what exists in pain care and what is best practice. And within our province, back in 2016, 2017, there was a really passionate group called the Provincial Pain Advisory Committee that knew we needed to look at pain in a different way, and just really were champions, kind of not in dedicated roles or positions to do this, but really dedicated folks who were passionate about pain care, and just really came together and kept moving this forward. And finally, in 2024, our government announced funding for a strategic health network. And that's really kind of cracked open the momentum that had been building to create this integrated hub and spoke step model of care in a province that has twice the national average of chronic pain. In Newfoundland and Labrador, 40% of our population identifies as having chronic pain.
Oh my God.
40%.
40%.
That amazes me every time I hear that.
And like you said, Virginia, we are so spread out. We have a lot of rural communities here. We even have a lot of trouble with access to internet, and, staying connected is a challenge. And we have a health accord that's guiding our delivery of healthcare in our province called Health Accord NL. And one of the foundational pieces of that is to deliver appropriate care to people closest to their home. So that means everyone's not traveling 10, 12 hours to get into the city to receive care. And really, that's what's been happening a lot. And so really, the time had come, the need was there. We have a mandate before us. And I honestly am just so excited. I've been working with the Health Authority. It'll be 20 years after Christmas. And I just feel that it's such an exciting time to be on the cusp of really making an.
And if I could just add, like, as you described, Julie, the people driving 10 to 12 hours to get to an appointment. And I'm thinking about all the good advice that we receive as people living with pain about pacing ourselves, about getting the rest we need, and so on, let alone the time and effort required to do that. It's just absolutely massive. So thank you for pointing that out. And it's so critical. Thank you.
And the finances.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure some people, there's no way they could do that. So it's nice to see that you're able to deliver this closer to the homes. But I mean, how do we do that? And there may be a lack of knowledge in these communities too about pain.
Absolutely. So when I had said we had done a number of consultations over the past year, we were so lucky to hold 2 patient dedicated focus groups in the winter and spring to actually hear from chronic pain patients in Newfoundland and Labrador what their journeys have been like. And one particular patient described making, I think it was 47 trips or something like that into St. John's. It's a 6-hour drive, and depleting their savings account,
Oh my gosh.
and having to, like you just said, Jennifer, and Virginia, you just touched on the finances too, but the fact of having to do that drive, so having to come a day ahead of schedule because it would take a day of rest to make up for just that long haul.
Yeah.
So being in an extra day ahead of the appointments, so extra night in hotels, extra, and then having to stay an extra day, and then driving home and almost being in bed and out of commission for another day after it. And you do that repeatedly. So we know that that's not good enough, right? I mean, we have to do better than that. And so with the hub and a spoke model, what the goal for that is that we will have a hub site located in the eastern urban zone. So that's going to be in St. John's. That's a tertiary level care for the province. But also in each of our zones, the central area, the western area, the rural part of the eastern zone, and the Labrador Grenfell zone, they will be spoke sites. And so we are designing pain care that can be allocated and I guess relocated into each of those spoke sites, so that if you live in the central area, we want to make sure that we can give you the same appropriate care that someone who lives in St. John's, if you lived in St. John's, that you would still receive it. So we're really trying to look at what exists, what are the barriers, how do we knock them down and give people access to the right level of care closest to their home. We know there'll be times when that's not possible, but there's going to be a lot of times that it is possible. And it's the voices of those patients, and talking about that impact on their life that drives and fuels us to do better.
That's amazing. And so British Columbia, I think, and just hearing you say this, Julie, I know we experienced some of this in the same way that, and Jen, probably in Northern Ontario. So in the northern parts of British Columbia, all the population of BC lives in the south. It's all within an hour and a half of the border, like I am. 4.5 million people or whatever it is, and we're all crammed in the bottom. You get up into northern BC, they're 12 and 14 hour, 16, 18-hour drives to where the specialized pain care is in the lower mainland. So I love this idea. I've always loved the concept of hub and spoke. And to hear that you're implementing that, I think is amazing. I just want to go back to something you mentioned earlier. You said, you had a dedicated team that had been working on this since like 2016, 2017. The Newfoundland and Labrador government in 2024 funded it. But in that time period, because getting funding from the government is never easy, can you speak a little bit to what finally triggered the government to recognize this for the importance that it is and to fund it?
Yeah, I think it was this group of just constantly, moving this forward. And then, like we would have organizational changes, we would have restructurings, we would have pandemics, we
Right.
would have Snowmageddon in Newfoundland and Labrador and have state of
Yeah.
emergency.
Yeah.
And like, this group described just this constant going ahead and coming back and losing momentum and rebuilding. There was a briefing note that was submitted around that time. And, our government listened. So I look at goal number 1, pain is recognized as a public health priority, and coordination of action across jurisdictions spurs collaboration, leadership, and support to ensure a consistent approach. I think it was leadership representing all parts of our province, because we weren't NL Health Services then, right? We were Eastern Health, Western Health, Central Health, Labrador. So this was really intentional. People intentionally came together outside of a structure that was a barrier for that. And so these individuals were passionate about this. They lobbied government, they advocated, they put pen to paper and briefing notes, and this really got underway. And when NL Health Services came together, concept of strategic health networks was new. And strategic health networks are really looking at evidence to drive practice. And it's like it's all about having a learning health and social system. And when I guess these briefing notes and this group had been advocating, and then finally it was like, yeah, let's dedicate one of our brand new structures, which is a strategic health network, to solely look at people who live with chronic pain, and let's do a better job. So I don't know what the actual magic kind of bullet was here, but it happened. And I'm just so excited to be a part of it.
That is amazing. And I'm going to hypothesize, and I would be interested to know your thoughts on this. You talked about goal number 1 there in the action plan. I wonder if, because a lot of health authorities over the years have struggled with having no direction, right? People knew things needed to be done, but they didn't know where to start or how to do it. And we know healthcare systems can be a bit siloed. So with that goal number 1, as you articulated it so beautifully, do you think in maybe some way the Newfoundland and Labrador government received the benefit of this beautiful action plan and said, hey, here is some guidance from the federal government. And finally, federal governments and provinces and territories are on the same page with this. Here's a goal. Here's this direction that we can go in. And hey, that's what we need to do. And then did it, because it sounds like they implemented it. I mean, I know you're still working on it, but they've done it. You guys are doing it.
They've been incredibly supportive. Yeah, there's no doubt. I think they were progressive. I think they saw the big picture. And also listen to the patients here. We have wait lists that are incredible, like not any different than the other provinces. I know we're all struggling with this because, I sit on the National Pain Advisory Committee. We all struggle with the same things. But our patients are, they were talking, like they were shouting loud that they need care. And we had providers who were listening and who were passionate, and we had a government who listened and supported us. So everything came together, and now we're here to do our best to bring it into action, bring it to fruition.
That's wonderful.
I think that speaks to the point too that, and even they mentioned this in the action plan, the need for everybody working together in order to make meaningful change, which is your policymakers, your healthcare providers, in your patients. And to hear you having patients around the table really warms my heart, because I think it can change the direction and make real meaningful change.
Well, I'm so proud. I have 2 patients in seats on our strategic health network. So the network is made up of administrators, government officials, providers, leadership represented across the whole province, 2 incredible patient advisors, and 2 patient advisors that are really diverse and represent different demographics. And having them, to sit there in our meetings and to review our terms of reference, to vote on the things that we are prioritizing and weighing in. Like, that's what a strategic health network is all about.
Excellent. And you know what? Further to the goal 1 reference that you were making, And you earlier said something about partners within the province and territory, but also like outside of there. So that combined with the way you started off today, talking about how exciting it is to be in this pain space and identifying best practices, is there opportunity to share this across provinces? Is there an appetite for that? Because that would certainly also lead us into the leadership referred to in goal 1.
Yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
so lucky to sit on the Pain Canada National Advisory Committee. So we meet regularly, and from that, we share what's happening, and then we've been able to create a subcommittee out of that, which we call the Province and Territory Subcommittee. So we kind of sidebar then.
Yep.
And Keith, I know you're on one of our supported self-management groups that, we share a group that are passionate about, we share what we're doing. And if somebody is passionate about it, they're kind of emailing and reaching out to that person saying, listen, can we meet and talk about this topic? And then we bring in other people. And then we come back to the larger platform and we share it. So that's been incredibly helpful for all of us, I think, because we don't need to keep reinventing the wheel. My colleague in BC, Christine Jock, and I, we're constantly in conversation because BC and Newfoundland and Labrador are very similar in our geography, our rural, some of the winter storms that we face that are barriers for transportation. And so it's really about learning from each other and bringing those kind of big rocks that kind of get in our path and bringing them to this group and believing that the answers are in the group. If we bring them, and we can do better all across and learn from each other.
I love that. And one of the things that is really striking me, and you've just spoken to it so well, Julie, is, and that's what we're seeing now, is in this focus on pain across Canada and doing better to help people systemically and clinically, we're not seeing any silos. We're not seeing provinces saying, no, this is what I'm doing. You need to, like, I have heard so many times, and as you said, you're talking to Chris here in BC. I think Chris is amazing. Here's what we have. Use what we're doing, and nobody is protecting the work they're doing. They're openly sharing it and saying, no, I've done it. Please don't reinvent my the wheel. Here it is. I think I have no data on this. I haven't done any kind of review, so I'll just say this. I think it's a bit of a first in Canada where we're seeing for a focused health issue where provinces and territory are all just working together under the umbrella of the federal government and saying, let's all work together. And it's amazing. What you guys are doing is incredible. I think Newfoundland and Labrador is the blueprint on how to roll it out. You guys have done is incredible.
And I think, too, and for our listeners who are listening, and just what you said, Keith, there's no silos, they can bring this to their healthcare providers and policymakers and say, hey, this is what they're doing in Newfoundland. This is what they're doing nationally. Time for us to start doing and maybe getting their provinces going, take away what they're learning from the other provinces and what you're hearing today.
And, like Susan Tupper in Saskatchewan, her and I just recently, a couple of weeks ago, key performance indicators, because they're new in Saskatchewan with their strategic health network dedicated to pain, and in Newfoundland as well. So we're connecting and we're like, how do we know if what we're doing is making a difference? How are we going to measure this?
Yeah.
And so, the part of evidence guiding practice, data informed decision making, evaluating, course correcting, like this is all stuff that is just as important, as designing and rolling things out, is making sure that we're on the right track. And so Susan and I brought this to the national group. We got a few people who are also interested in it. I met with Health Canada and asked them, what are your indicators at Health Canada that are important to you when it comes to pain? Susan is really passionate about screening for pain in primary care and has questions listed for primary care providers about how pain is impacting your life, impacting your sleep upon a visit to your care provider, your primary care provider.
Brilliant.
So I think,
oh God, I love that.
Emotion, right? Like there's so much bubbling up that we're at a place that's snowballing.
That is amazing. You talk about key performance indicators, not the most exciting part of healthcare sometimes from the front line, but like you say, so critically important. Are we doing the right things? And how do we know? The only way to know is measure those outcomes. I'm a bit of a data nerd, so that really warms my heart. But
As am I. I love it.
Yeah.
I have one of the really nice pieces about the strategic health networks is that we have embedded evaluation consultants, planning
Oh,
specialists.
God.
I have a researcher being recruited right now. And one of the pieces that I'm most excited about as it relates to equitable access to this, I guess, multifaceted or step model of care is that we are in the process of hiring a patient navigator who will work with our central intake office. So we're designing a single entry for this. It'll be a provincial central intake. So no matter where you sit in the province, if you get referred due to chronic pain, it's coming through a single place. So that way we're catching people and we're not losing people through the cracks. And from there, there will be a triage. And everybody, this is something that I love. We're going to offer everybody an orientation session so people get a baseline education around pain and what exists to help them. It's going to be prescribed. We envision this being prescribed by our nurse practitioner as a part of your treatment plan. So not just something that, you got time to do it, because we know that the education, the peer support, we know that they are recognized therapies. And so we are going to build them into the care plan. And then, because it's a wild and woolly world out there, right? When it's accessing online modules or groups or whatever, that's where a navigator is going to come in. And that navigator is going to hold the hand of the patient and make sure that they, if it's an internet connection issue, well, let's get it sorted out. If it's just a lack of awareness, let's sort that out, whatever. That's what our goal is there.
I loved to have had that when I was going through the system.
I don't want to speak for all of us, but I'm sitting here thinking the same thing. 20 odd years ago, if there was a single point of entry where they said, here's your path, here's some education, I would think that my path would have been a little different than it was. So that's why I say, Julie, I think you guys have the blueprint on how to do it right.
Yeah, I'm thinking the same thing. And ditto, Virginia and Keith, for different reasons, 11 years in for myself, a year and a half to get into a pain clinic, and not a lot of that coaching in between, like within that time period. And it makes you wonder, and that's not a fault to anyone. It's just simply the way the structure was at that time and everyone doing their best. But nonetheless, I really, really appreciate what I'm hearing. And, honestly, I'm hearing that the work you're doing is actually covering off each one of the 6 goals in the action plan.
Yes. Yeah.
You could put a little tick mark next to each one of them.
Excited.
Yes.
Yeah, understandably so. Yeah. Yeah. That is amazing. Julie, the people, this is an audio podcast, so they can't see our faces on the screen. You're telling us what you're doing, and we're all, wide-eyed on this. And we're hearing so many great things that you're doing. And, I think this is kind of a great way to sort of wrap up our little chat with you today, because you've offered so many positives. And in our short conversation here, such a richness of what you're doing and continuing to do. But you're just talking about, in our humble opinion, all the right ways to do it, because it's all about focusing on the person who lives with pain and giving them the best help and support to get there, right from your single point of entry and patient education. It's just unbelievable. So, personally, thank you for you and all that you do, and the Newfoundland and Labrador, the government. It's just truly incredible. So it's been so great to have you join us today and talk about the amazing things happening in Newfoundland and Labrador.
I'd like to extend my thanks to Julie. I always enjoy connecting with you.
Likewise. And I just wanted to say one last thing, that if you're a patient or you're a person who lives with chronic pain and you're listening in today, our work is on behalf of you within the health authority. Like, it's your story, it's your voice that's guiding every meeting we hold, every policy we write, every briefing note we submit is in service to you. Because, that's what we're here for. We're here to try to make things better.
That's amazing. Thanks for that, Julie.
Thank you so much. And Virginia, Keith, and I would also like to thank all of you who are tuning in to the Action on Pain podcast. We hope this episode has shed some light on the important work being done in Canada. And in this case, certainly the amazing work happening in Newfoundland, Labrador, as guided by the Health Canada's An Action Plan for Pain in Canada. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And until next time.
Thank you for joining us today on Action on Pain. If you enjoyed the discussion, please follow us on your preferred podcast platform to stay updated, and please share with your networks. A 5-star rating and review would help others find our show. Your feedback is important.
This podcast does not contain any medical advice. Please consult with your doctor if you have any questions or concerns.
The Action on Pain podcast is made possible by the generous support of the Chronic Pain Network, a national research and knowledge mobilization network.
The views, opinions, and content shared by hosts and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of the Chronic Pain Network or its funders.